Welcome to Deep Dive Down Under, a podcast that delves into inspiring stories from individuals with big hearts, bold visions, and profound purpose. Storytelling lies at the heart of human culture. For tens of thousands of years, Australian Indigenous communities, like many traditional cultures, have shared wisdom through stories. Long before written words, these stories taught children about their culture, environment, and law, passing down timeless lessons for generations to come. Each of us carries a story, a journey of growth, resilience, and inspiration. Within these journeys lie seeds of wisdom planted by mentors or nurtured through personal discovery, shaping the lives now led. Join us as we explore the world through the eyes of others. Their powerful stories invite us to expand our horizons, find inspiration, and connect more deeply with humanity. Whether you're seeking a spark of motivation or a moment of reflection, this podcast offers a space to listen, learn, and hear the whispers of your own soul. We take a moment to honour the traditional owners of the land we live on. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, acknowledging their wisdom and stewardship of this beautiful country.
Welcome, Mello.
Thank you, darling. Very nice to be here today.
Yeah. So I might start with how we connected.
Sure.
So we first met at Dawn's.
Yes.
At the temple.
The suburban temple, indeed. Yes.
I've been on some little mini retreats that you've run there and had a crystal healing session that you offer, and you've taught me a little bit about crystals, which was amazing. And really the highlights from the retreats have been the tools that you give for ascension or for the spiritual path.
Certainly, yes.
Like the 6 heart virtues. And
toroidal breath.
And the toroidal breath. So I think we'll touch on those. But I'd first, I think, love to start with how you have evolved to be this incredible being of light that, this positive influence for a lot of people. And so starting with your childhood, just touching on that, because I know you grew up in a little bit of a unique childhood where you're very connected with nature.
Yes.
And you explained that you had a natural interest and affinity with crystals.
Yes,
so,
that was the beauty of it. But I lived at the edge of the city. Literally the street that I was in, beyond that it petered out and became open paddocks and gullies and trees, and then a bit further up the hill there were sheep grazing. And yet it was only 5 minutes down the hill and there was the Gulf, the ocean. So the winter time we were running around the gully and playing with our go-karts. The summertime we spent it down the beach. And a little bit further up over the hills there were much more open fields and there were old copper mines. So going into the mining shafts with basic little torches and finding little bits of green stone or bits of quartz crystal became part of the joy. So making a collection of very basic stones, and yet it still meant something to me. And then that led to finding books on fossicking, and so we go and have barbecue picnics in zones where you might find some emerald, or you might find different types of quartz or pyrites and so on. And the Adelaide Hills does afford a number of places where we could find crystals. But the other important bit was that my dad was a bit of an adventurer. So at one of those particular mining sites where there's an adit, one of those mines that goes straight into the hill, there was a cliff face above it. So he was one of those rare dads who would make the time to take myself and some of my friends down to adventurize around in these joints. So one time he brought along a star picket and a bit of thin cotton rope and a big hammer, put the star picket in at the top of the hill, threw the rope down over the edge, and then abseiled down and encouraged us 11-year-olds to do the same thing. It was a long way down. It was pretty rocky down below. But yeah, come on, have a go. And it was life-threatening. You know, if you let go at the wrong time, you could have been seriously injured or dead. But doing that at 11 was such a profound moment of you can overcome fears, and the achievement of actually getting to the bottom, so elated. And then sailing became the next big adventure. So again, he encouraged me to face my fears. Go sailing on a day when the winds were really strong and the waves were large, and not come to any harm, but come to understand that you can have an immense joy out of facing fears. So, yes, that all led to thinking that doing geology at university would give me much more engagement with crystals. But what it really led to was an engagement with digging great big holes in the ground to rape the earth for lots of minerals to make whatever we make out of that stuff. So I took time out. I just didn't feel quite right with it all. And I happened to read a little article in a Sydney University newspaper about organic farming, bringing back non-chemical ways to grow food. And it just touched my heart. I came back from that, having a year of adventures around up and down the East Coast, and starting my spiritual journey much more so, because when I first went to uni, I saw my first week yoga class in such and such a room. So I went along, having read a few books on yoga, and in Savasana, at the end of the yoga session, I went somewhere, such that the yoga teacher had to come and bring me back. Everybody else had gone off to lunch or what have you. And then she mentioned that she was also a meditation teacher, transcendental meditation, which back in 1971 was kind of new and a big deal, but also made famous, of course, because the Beatles went off to Maharishi to learn about it. So at the ripe old age of 17, there I was meditating daily and really enjoying the fact that 20 minutes of following a mantra and I would transcend. I'd forget all about the world around me and even about thought or emotion or colour, to completely go into that non-relevant space of transcended consciousness, hence the name. And to understand that when you come back out of that space, as you rise back up towards the surface, a colour, a flow of motion becomes a feeling and then becomes a thought before you reach the surface. So it gave a direct experience of the fact that our surface world is just the surface world. It's not the truth of who we are or where we come from. And so that year off from doing the studies was a year of going to the Theosophical bookshop and reading many different texts, particularly about theosophy, which late 1800s, early 2000s, 1900s was about all sorts of meditations, about the chakras, about auric fields, about the fact of living beyond the human form into the higher realms and then coming back in reincarnation. And each of the texts that I'd read, I'd then explore in practices. And before plant spirit medicine became the vogue that it is now, it was the joy of actually being able to access some very pure LSD. And having read Timothy Leary and other books, then Baba Ramdas, to treat that as a tool for psychic and spiritual awakening. It wasn't at all, to me, a party drug. Led me to have some very profound experiences where I got to directly experience what ascending out of the body into astral realms, about firing up the Kundalini and really experiencing it. It caused profound awakenings, which you can never deny or suppress. And one of the core things in Theosophy is there are three states of being: the hall of ignorance, the hall of sorrow, and the hall of knowledge. And it's called the Hall of Sorrow because once you've started to awaken, you can never go back to being ignorant. But it's a long way from ignorance to knowledge. And of course, knowledge is not just knowledgeable facts. It's the knowledge of who you really are, of your energetic bodies, and all the capabilities that come with that. So that combination of a passion for the earth, and hence all those years of gardening, where growing pure food was it's a strong conviction. And when there were no instant ways to do it in Australia, there were no books on organic gardening in Australia in 1972. And most of the fertilisers available now, which are qualified as organic, were also not available. So there's a lot of things I had to learn by trial and error. And whereas an apprenticeship to become a plumber or an electrician is a 3-year process, in organic gardening, it's a 20-year process. Because you try something, you follow the 12-month process and see where it leads and go, I didn't quite get this part right. The crop was barely a success at all. But you keep going, you keep going. So that was part of learning endurance and dedication to purpose. And the meditation processes, it got sort of waylaid while I was busy having children and establishing the farm. And red wine became a way to chill myself out until the higher lights come in. And so a dear friend of mine who was working up in the city came and had a 6-month sabbatical, stayed with us, we had a little cottage for him, worked on the farm, related to my then early teenage children, and said one day, afternoon tea time, busy on the farm, because I was very busy doing so much there, you want to try some Reiki? So we sat down under the trees up in the backyard. He just sat behind me, put his hands on my shoulders, didn't really say much, and then said, just relax and just let the feelings come. And 20 minutes went by in a flash. And then he said, so how was that? And my response was, when that violet light came in, I just felt so peaceful. And I went with the light. So different from gotu, and this didn't work, and I've got to deal with that, and I've got 20 employees twice a week, and the market business. It was a really hard gig. So I found myself 2 weeks later committing $250, which was a big deal in the early 90s, to do Reiki 1 training. And the very first attunement, we went around the circle afterwards of what do you experience, and somebody said, this beautiful rainbow colour flowed in, and somebody else saw dolphins. And there was about 12 or more of us doing it. And when the teacher got around to me, I found myself saying, I saw myself in an orange robe walking down a big pathway in Angkor Wat, along with other monks. And that teacher was a rather special Reiki teacher. And he looked closely at me and he said, your life from now on is going to get very interesting. Because yes, that first attunement, the 4 attunements of that day, I'd driven there, my wife drove us home, she also did it. And I'm watching these little pencil diameter golden circles in my palms expand out. So by the time we got home, 1.5-hour drive, they were the size of a 50-cent piece. And I just went, I can heal anything on my body, I can heal our relationship, I can heal all manner of things. So from that moment onwards, my meditations became with Reiki hands on belly and heart, and all manner of profound journeys just opened up, which for me happened so easily. Of course, many other folks have a much more difficult time with it. So I kept on farming and kept on expanding that, and then really exploring other methods of meditation, because I'd let my transcendental meditation kind of lapse. And the thing of Meditate deeper than a Zen monk. Just put these headphones on and listen to this syncopated beat. Seemed like an interesting thing to explore. It's called HoloSync. It's still around now, but this is back when it came on a little reel-to-reel cassette thing. And there were 49 levels in that. So I invested in the whole program, and over 3 years got to the point where I'd reached level 43 before I moved on to an even more complex form of meditation. Because by then, the early days of the internet allowed the fact that there weren't too many people at all in my social circle, but there were people online that I could start really connecting with about what was really going on for me. And prior to Facebook, Google provided a thing called Ning groups, which is a template that you could then create any group you wanted for any interest that was your forte and invite people to join. So when you wanted to join it, a bit like Facebook, you were able to put up a profile. So I found a group called Children of the Sun. And a woman in America who became a close friend had this dream of having a meditation group that we'd meditate around the world sequentially for every new moon and every full moon, with the basic tenet being that we'd all contribute light and heart love to uplift the frequencies of the consciousness of humanity. And by then I had a practice where I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, go into the healing room that I'd established, and do my meditation and my journaling. So because she'd set it up to go in from America, it meant that in Australia it was 2:30 in the morning. A bit earlier than normal, but I felt keen to do it. So I go into my room, sit in the chair, and I just knew straight away when it was 2:30, because this feeling of empowerment, and for 1 hour I would contribute, and then it would ease off again. So we went from a few hundred to 76,000 people in 12 months. Wow. And more than half of them were in South America. So it became Hijos de Sol, the Spanish version. It was a very profound, moving thing. And it also allowed that experience of how intuition guides us much better than the mind thinking. Because with 76,000 profiles, who do you choose to really connect to? Because there was a way to send messages to each other. So I ended up becoming part of the kind of management group of the whole thing, and had very specific friends in Hawaii, America, England, parts of Australia, South America. And so it became a very deep and meaningful thing. And then Facebook came along. And suddenly, so many people were besotted by Facebook that our group faltered, and then Google pulled the pin. No more Ning groups. It just collapsed, disappeared. And we weren't able to recreate it on Facebook because there was so much opportunity to seek connection as an individual. Look at me, I've got this fabulous profile, and it lost its charge. But the core group of us didn't. And by the time 2007 came along, my meditations had led to the point of big guidance. So on the 7th of the 7th, 2007, the 888, the 999, I was particularly felt moved to do and go to places that Spirit showed me that big crystals that had been put in an etheric lock at the end of Atlantis, it was time to reawaken them. And on the 8th of the 8th, 2008, there was 12 of us around the earth who were all friends from the days of the old Children of the Sun, who all had either a vortex pace or a medicine wheel or a particularly powerful altar. And we spent 3 months connecting online, but also energetically, to create this really powerful intention that on that particular day, 12 of us from all sorts of places around the world would send our energy down into the earth and then magnify it together and send it out to the 24 most powerful spiritual energy vortexes around the planet. And so I had a vortex place I discovered on my property, and this is where the woo-woo part gets very magical, because where I lived at Delamere, there was large amounts of big quartz rocks coming out of the dirt here and there, and a hassle when you're trying to plough. But I had a set pathway I used to go to, stop, take off my shoes, didn't matter if it was the middle of winter, walk a path into the vortex and do a meditation there just as the sun was going down most afternoons. So when this build-up happened for the 888, I walked down the path and there's this lump of quartz sitting next to the path that wasn't there yesterday. And the guidance would say, that's the stone for so-and-so. So I ended up creating 12 crystal lumps around the vortex for each of the people involved in this process, while they were also setting up 12 stones or candles or sacred pieces of wood around their medicine wheel or their vortex. So we were connecting at the physical level and at the etheric level. Just before the actual day, I could literally go and stand at the crystal for so-and-so and see with my third eyesight that person in etheric form standing in front of me. We really developed this incredibly intense and powerful lived experience of connecting at our etheric consciousness level. And of course, by then I'd already started doing crystal resonance therapy. I did a training to get a diploma in that and had to do lots of case studies. But when all of that was done and I got my bit of paper, then I found that my own capacity was to be able to invoke the person's higher self, so that not only would I put crystals on how their higher self determined, not what I thought, this one should go here. It was, and you want to go there. So it was basically on all the chakras of the body and down below into the lower ones and ones for the higher chakras. But then once all of those had been energized so that the person's etheric body rises up to meet the frequencies of the crystals, then the Reiki hands would go on and their higher self would speak to them. And to this day, that still happens with ease and grace. So the person leaves feeling energetically soothed, healed, energized, with a recording on their phone of what the higher self guidance is. And that can be 20 minutes, half an hour. There's a lot of guidance and instruction in there. And every person leaves feeling so much clearer and lighter and ready to take on that guidance and change their lives. Fast forward to this last weekend. A young woman from Chile who's now living in Australia, she had a session with me 5 months ago, and she shared at the end of the retreat how what she was given then has caused her to take on the process of getting an Australian residency visa, which is costing her a lot of money via lawyers and focus, but it's because her higher self said she is meant to live in this country and contribute her profound psychic natural abilities to helping humankind's healing and activation, which is exactly what she was doing in the higher level retreat that she did just yesterday, where a whole group of people with their crown chakras towards a large, beautiful rose quartz sphere, holding hands so we create a star pattern, and we place intention, read out with invocations, into each other, magnify it collectively, and then send it up into the field of human consciousness. And yesterday's group actually had a couple of 3 people who have the psychic sight to actually witness this exact process happening. And That's the level of profundity we have available to us now. Yes, so after 50 years I've hung up my hoe and my shovel. I'm only gardening to feed my partner and I and a few other people now and then, because eating fresh, grown with love and organic practice vegetables is core to being pretty fit and healthy in my 70s. Because eating vital food is absolutely core to a vital spiritual practice. Getting something off a shelf, chucking it out of the freezer into a microwave and gobbling it while you're scrolling. No wonder people are going to doctors all the time and being unwell. There's no vitality in that. Especially if you microwave it, you just destroy all the vitality. So, eating healthily, doing a Tai Chi and yogic and exercise practice, doing at least an hour of meditation daily, is not what I have to do, it's what I choose to do. Because it brings such a deep warmth of connection to the self, the higher self, and other, that life is shaped from those experiences. Totally shaped from it. And I'd love to share a particular little part of what my guidance gave me before I went to visit my sons recently, about not judging anything. And it was a strong admonition and I took it on board. So I made that conscious decision that their particular life choices and patterns are what they are choosing to do. They're all men in their 40s, they've all got generous hearts, but I was still thinking, well, they should eat like I do, etc. But when I let that go and went to visit them, the one who has often had been challenged by things in life and had wanted to unburden it onto me, he'd already made changes days and weeks before I went there. So time is not linear. They'd already made choices to be more happily in their own heart guidance, and that was magnified because I wasn't coming there, even though I wasn't saying it. I had a feeling of, that's not right. That causes a constriction of the energy flow. Letting that go, even now, is another fine-tuning of my own spiritual awakening process. And we don't live in a fixed universe made of stuff. We live in a fluid demonstration that consciousness is actually only slowed down light. And everything has consciousness. That's the profound basis for living a spiritually aware life. And so the great gift of being open to all of these things, doing a range of pretty intense meditative practices, have allowed me to access realms where beings who dwell in higher consciousness do come through to help those of us who are on the path to be of service, to guide us, to influence what we offer. So, many years ago, a little church not too far from here, a mysterious blistering occurred in the plaster behind the altar, showing Mother Mary holding Yeshua's body with a crown of thorns after it was taken off the cross. She manifests there, she appears there. Not to everyone, but for those who are really open to the experience. And I went there 23 years ago. Not when there was a lot of hoo-ha about miracle cures and all that distortion of the spiritual essence. After all that had subsided. And she presented herself before me. She blessed the palms of my hands, which allowed me to offer her blessings to others. And then in a particular meditation I was doing roughly 12 months ago now, having been a conduit for other higher frequency beings, she reappeared in the sacred space of my heart, and she has been guiding, giving me instruction in particular meditations that I teach, and being present when I offer the retreats. So everybody who comes is invited to take home on the Friday night a little form to come up with the most pressing question you have deep inside yourself that you're not quite sure how to answer. And at some particular point on the Saturday between meditation teachings and other aspects, they ask their question, and every single person gets their own very personal but very deeply private answer to their most yearning question. It's not about, am I going to meet somebody? It's not about, should I buy this crypto? This is about their inner guidance and where they're going to. So it's such a wondrous experience to be sitting there, yes, in my body, but having her quite clearly be the one speaking through this body and offering guidance to people. And this is the curious thing about being a conscious channel, is that it's my body, my throat, my vocal cords giving forth the words. But like a little ceremony we did for the equinox, there was a lot of flow of words given. Somebody there after, in the next part of the event, said, when you said this bit about so-and-so and such, what was that about again? Because I didn't quite get it all. And I had to honestly say, I don't know. Because it wasn't me speaking. It wasn't my intelligence. It was me being the conduit. Because part of my development has been that the I, the ego, the assumed sense of who I am, I don't attach importance to that. It's useful for driving the car and going shopping, but it's not the spiritual truth. It's only the practical surface part. The real truth is that we are divine conscious conduits of consciousness itself. The source, the creator, God, call it by whatever name you feel comfortable with. And Mother Mary, of course, she brings the real Christ consciousness wisdom, which is not what so many of the Christian churches turned it into. As she says very often, that which I teach, and so did my son and his perfect complement, his wife, his partner, Mary Magdalene, is not what became Christianity. Christ consciousness is when you open your own channels to allow the divine to flow into you, to inform what choices you make, what you feel compelled to do, and gives you the capacity to let go of judgment, of fear, of bias, of lust, of anger, and all those things which make life so difficult. To let go of using substances to cope with your fear, which you hide under anger or blame. If only my parents hadn't done this, that, or the other, I wouldn't be an alcoholic now. And how old are you? In your 50s? You haven't gone beyond victimhood. So what is taught through me and by this vessel is divine conscious guidance to allow people through meditative practice to enliven their witness, part of them which exists outside the body, where their consciousness through this meditative practice becomes established. So when you're about to go and get angry at somebody, or when you're about to go and drink alcohol or take some substance, that guidance point says, is that for your highest good? Could it basically be that rather than coping using a substance or a blame, that if you came truly inside yourself, where you could experience the blessings of the divine entering into you, especially through the heart, you would find peace. You would find that surrendering, using faith and trust as your tools, that your life would transform and heal, and so ease and grace become your known experience. This is how I choose to live consciously. That somebody out there or something out there or having the biggest house or 10 houses and lots of money, lots of toys, does that make you happy? Does that make you feel complete? Or are they in fact a burden? I've got to find somebody new to rent house number 8, because if they don't rent it and not wreck it, my house of cards might tumble down. Or here I am with this huge house and my 6th wife has just ripped me off and run away and she hates me. And so how did that work for you? This is the great gift of Mary's teaching, because she presences in a state of humility and absolute knowing that the divine actually is accessible just inside here. It doesn't require all sorts of big fancy religious practices and beliefs, because so often each religion, you'll find, doesn't like people in another religion. And that belies the fact that it's not God essence. Because how could the goddess, the great realm of consciousness itself, not love all of its creations? White, black, green, purple, tall, short, wide, any name, any genre you want to call yourself, none of that really matters. Because we all come from the one divine conscious light and manifest and inhabit bodies, whether they're human, elephant, dog, come from a land where everybody's purple, come from another country, another realm. We're all part of the one conscious light. And when you accept that, everything changes. Not only do you find peace, calm, you find that your circle of friends are also feeling that which is inside you, so the sense of loving becomes real love. It's not lust. It's not, if I cling to you, you'll take all my pain away. Because that's not, romance, sure. The tall, dark, handsome stranger swept me off my feet and we galloped off over the hill together and lived happily ever after, or at least until next week. That's not it. The it that this one knows from real experience is that, yes, I do have a loving relationship with a partner, and I have a loving relationship with a circle of other friends, most of them female, some men, with whom we have the most warm and beautiful hugs. We have a knowing that we are all conscious divine beings. And so we don't want anything of each other. We give to each other the joyfulness of doing a dance together where we all hold hands and roll around in a circle, doing all different shapes, and we laugh together. We do other dances where we stand hip to hip and arms around waist, eyes shut, and just allow a sway to develop organically from the collection, not from the individual. And when we finally open our eyes at the end of that soft and melodic piece of music, we gaze into each other's eyes, feeling the fact, the true fact, we are all one being in a multiplicity of different, apparent, separate forms. This is the great joyfulness of now. And because of all this light coming in, everybody is being encouraged from within to let go of fear, to let go of greed, to let go of judgment, to let go of avarice and lust and addiction and all of those crazinesses of if only I had a whole lot more stuff, then I'd be happy. I've spent time with people who live in the highlands of South America, Inca folks, who have so little of anything, but they have joy. They can have a beautiful laugh, and they can share a very humble meal of potatoes that have been kept in stone cages in creeks so that it leaches out the starches so they keep without refrigeration for months. And they can have a meal of just potato and some corn that they've grown that's dry there in the rafters with the most basic little fireplace, extremely poor by our standards, but so happy beyond anything that most people in our world of so much stuff don't find. Life is a beautiful experience when you allow yourselves to explore what actually lies inside your mystical heart portal, your innate connection to all of life everywhere.
There's a lot to reflect on that, but so I want to touch on a few things.
Sure.
Starting with the last few comments. From what I've learned is that, we grasp onto materials, or some people, should I say, grasp onto the materials because it is coming from a place of fear that our society puts pressure onto us that if we have a house and we've paid off the mortgage, then we'll be safe because that's what our society puts pressure on us. And then once you've got one house, then you're like, if I have two houses, then I'll be even safer. So but when you tap into the heart, and then what you're doing on your retreats and Dawn's doing with her community, you create this sense of safeness with each other, with connection. And more you recognise that safety comes from your heart. It doesn't come from stuff. And it's breaking down the illusion of that things aren't going to make you feel safe. And then your ex-wife will run away with one of the houses anyway. Like the Incas, they don't have anything to lose. So they're not in a place of fear.
No.
They're in a place of presence because they live day by day, and they're in a place where they have a great sense of community. And they're connected to land, to Mother Nature. And we're becoming more and more separated from Mother Nature. So I feel like that, when you spend time with people in rural, impoverished communities, you recognise how rich they are in so many other ways. I've travelled to the Philippines and we visited sites where they live in rubbish tip sites, and we went to a Chinese cemetery where because the Chinese have these huge mini houses for their deceased. So these people end up living in there, and they even set up a school in one of them where I travelled. But they were so happy, and the children just, when we were walking around, they just all run up and laugh and playing because they had this sense of community even though they had nothing. It was like they were so much more joyous, and we all were touched by it, with the group that we went with. So I feel like sense of community is so important, which is definitely what we're creating in that space. And a sense where we're connecting with each other's needs being met on a deep spiritual level, on the heart level. So it's very important work, and I feel that this is the ripple effect that we need in our community more and more, because, you know, with suicide rates going up and depression and anxiety and stress levels, it's like, we've got to come back to connecting with nature, connecting with our neighbours and community. This is
one of the Indian mystics didn't do a lot of writing. He just presenced with his devotees. But one of his core lines was to say, there is no other. That we are all simply manifestation points of the one field of human consciousness. And the other aspect I'd really like to bring in here about this sense of safety is that in the retreat yesterday, two of the people there, we recognized each other from previous lives that we have shared. And that's the other part of our secular world. You know, when I've got all my stuff, then I'll be safe. And then when I die, well, the lights go out and that's it, it's all over. Actually, that's the complete opposite. Because when my dear father passed on, obviously we had a beautiful, loving relationship, all that. Anyway, when he died, 2 weeks after the funeral and the body was cremated, he reappeared up on my hillside on my farm one afternoon. I felt his presence. I turned around and yes, I could see through the body, but I could see him there. And he simply said to me telepathically, everything you thought about the afterlife is true. And then the appearance of him went off again. That's an incredibly beautiful confirmation. When I was 17, I was surfing a very vigorous ocean beach, much more confident than I really had the capacity to do. Anyway, I got washed off a board, didn't have the cord back then, so I'm banging around the bottom, struggling for air, ended up taking a lungful of water, and immediately all that turbulence and fear disappeared. And I, as a point of consciousness, not the body as such, was floating up in absolute bliss, spiraling towards this magnificent crystal light that I could see ahead of me. Completely relaxed, absolutely at peace. And then my face is getting scraped on barnacles on the reef, my body's coughing water out, and my immediate thought was, oh damn, I'm back here again. I was quite happy to go back to the light. So I've got direct experience in two ways, as well as this knowing of certain people that I meet, and immediately I go, you're familiar, I know you. And here's one of the great jokes. Our etheric blueprint determines the fact that our basic facial features are the same no matter what incarnation, what gender you are, how tall, short, whatever, but the faces remain remarkably similar. The same eyes, as you will, looking out at the world. And that's a knowing. It's not a ambit claim. And of course, there are other religions around the world, other communities, societies where everybody knows that reincarnation's the truth. There is not that crazy fear of, I've got to pack everything into this life because that's the only one you get. Eternity is actually a rather long time. So those are the things which cause the fears to be overwhelming, to be clinged onto. There is so much indoctrination in this Western secular society, which is all fear-based, which means that if you billionaires are obscenely wealthy, and most others are scrabbling to try and emulate them because of the indoctrination. And that's the ego. And what is the ego? The ego is a coping mechanism that we create either from childhood traumas or the joys or terrors of being a teenager, going to high school. And everybody's in fear, scrabbling around trying to pretend that because they've got the most glamorous female body, because they're the best sportsman, that they know what's going on. They don't. They make it up. Underneath all that, they're not very sure either of who they are. And then we have a society where celebrity is, people bow down to that celebrity illusion. If only I could have the looks of so-and-so, if only I could sing like such and such, then I'll be famous and then I'll be okay. Really? How many celebrities are not particularly okay at all? Countless relationships, drug addiction, crazy behaviours, a string of huge houses where they rattle around. And if you look beyond the presentation on those late night talk shows, it's all very superficial. And that I'll be the great winner in some reality contest means that there's a great string of losers for the one winner. And people who watch those programs, they're called programs. They're not entertainment, they're programs. On a big screen, flickering away with all that sound around, is telling your subconscious you're not good enough. I quit television 20 years ago. Such a gift. And then one night I happened to be in somebody's house and they had the big screen going. They didn't turn it off when I was visiting. And the news came on. And I went, wait a minute. It's 10 years since I watched the news and it's exactly the same. Different faces, different places, but it's exactly the same format. It's a program of trauma. There's actually less crime, less violence in the world in the last 10 years than for all those years prior. But the news sells advertising by showing you trauma. We just went through a cyclone and all the news was hyping up just how terribly bad it was. And my partner and I, who were in it, and witnessed that yes, we had some strong winds, we had some big rain, but it was nowhere near as fearsome as the propaganda on the so-called news was making it appear to be. So anybody who wasn't in the cyclone, oh, how are you going? Did you survive? It's okay, folks. It was nowhere near. I mean, there are cyclones where, sure, really big things happen. But this was only a Cat 2 down to Cat 1, and it took a very slow path. And in fact, some of us helped to moderate it. You can even go so far in meditative practices to put protective spheres around certain places. And our town is prone for being very flood prone. The last one, only a few years ago, went 2 stories high. It devastated so much. This time, the water came up to 30 centimetres less than the wall that protects it from the river and went down again. There was no flooding at all. And that was very unexpected. We can affect the world around us, our own experience, and that of other people who are close to us by intention. Because it is a field of energy being affected by each one of us as focal points who have the power of intention. And as dear Einstein said, the greatest gift of humanity is our imagination, our capacity to image create. And I've proved this now many times. If I hold an image, give it loving intention, and project that into the field, and then just wait. That particular situation manifests over and over again. That's how it's worked. We are powerful creators. We are not victims. And working forever in some job you really don't like, doing something which is not for the highest good of other or the planet, just so you can get enough money to pay more money to a bankster who's not loaning you money, they're loaning you a promissory note made from nothing. We've really lost the path. Living more communally, sharing more, not from ego, I want to get more from that one or this one. We can change all that. And it's really starting to happen now. It's the most profoundly beautiful time to be alive, even while in some ways it's a time of the great deconstruction of the obscene obsession with more stuff.
Yeah, my uncle Albert, who was my one biggest mentor, who helped my parents when they came from Holland, just being a bit of a sponsor or support person. He was very wise. He lived till 95. And he used to say, instead of saying, I want more, he's like, I want less. So because he said with that energy of I want, you think about it, like when we want more, what are all the impacts of wanting more? You know, it's resources from the earth. It's, possibly producing more plastic waste if it's plastic, There's lots of consequences to I wants. And if we all want more in our society, how much resources are we using up with that word? So he taught me a lot with some of his little stories that he would share. So I have that in the back of my mind to be careful with the words that we use,
And wake up to ourselves. When
and
we're
it
driving,
is an attachment too to it because, I want to be more happy even like on the emotional level as well. There's a different kind of want, isn't it?
Well, that's the great degradation of relationship, that people come together attracted because of appearance or some sort of feeling. The whole romance chick flick propaganda says that
pour your wounds match.
That you can come and fix all my wounds, and for that I'll say thank you. But the other partner is also subconsciously wanting the same thing. And so part of what I teach, part of what I practice, is that a true loving relationship is sustainable and nurturing of each other when you're not sucking your wounds repair out of the other, but getting that from your divine connection. My partner and I both meditate for an hour or two every morning in silence with our own process of flowing into our divine nurturance. And that's where we get our healing. Then we can come together and give of that knowing, that heart love to each other. And therefore, if I'm hugging some other woman, a long, deep hug, it's not because I'm lusting after her, it's because we're sharing a divine heart connection moment. And I can hug other men. One of the men who did the retreat, he calls me love, and I call him darling. And we're not gay folks, we're just men who honour the fact that our inner feminine sees each other, and we have this trust and respect and loving, the capacity for two men to be loving towards each other, which is not sexual relational, it's a spiritual loving. Because that's another part of all of this, is the woundedness of all these women becoming so much in their masculine to succeed at the corporate game, haven't got time for kids, haven't got time for relationship. Women who go onto hookup sites, when I started hearing about that, I went, well, we've really lost the divine feminine. When a woman just wants a quick sexual release from some random stranger in between corporate meetings and deadlines, that's not feminine, not at all. That's part of the tragedy of what we've done. We've lost the true identity of what a capable man can be, strong and giving and able, but also has a gentleness. And yes, women, of course, they've got to have strength to be able to allow a whole human body to grow inside them, to pass out through a pretty small aperture, and then to nurture them at 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning when you're dead exhausted. You've still got to get up and change a nappy and feed them and do all of that stuff. There's profound strengths in the feminine and in the masculine, but the moral fibre to handle adversity where you support each other rather than go, well, you're not good enough, I'm out of here, I'll take half the stuff or more and go and grab another one. This roundabout thing of having a huge roll around of relationships that only last for 6 months, a year, 2 years or something, nobody's finding healing in that. They're just adding to their woundedness. And they find themselves being so judgmental of, oh yeah, I started dating so-and-so, but she said this one night, so I flicked him. Or he didn't do what I wanted him to do because the judgment is finding him not good enough, whereas really he doesn't know what to do because he never got trained in that. Emotional, relational, true connection, how can a child learn that from a single parent? How can a boy learn to become a man when there is no man around? And when you've got a couple of 3 generations of that same process, no wonder there are adult boys who don't really know how to be men. And women who have chosen that career path as the most important thing, when they're sitting in their luxury apartment with their great share portfolio, with their fancy car down in the basement, do they feel content? Do they feel whole? Or do they feel that they have really lost the essence of what it is to be human because their God has been the acquisition of stuff and status? So the collapse of the obsession with materials and I've got a bigger ego than you, so I win, that falling apart now is not only necessary, it's immensely healing. So when our town did go under, there were some people lost their lives, the great deal of people lost everything they had. The community came together in a really profound way to support each other in all sorts of fashions. It's that curious thing that when humans have got their stuff on the go, they don't care about anybody else because they want to make more profit, sell more stuff, be deceitful. All the scams, the frauds, the goods which don't live up to the promise of what they're meant to be, all the toxic foods, or the so-called medications which just get you having to have more and more medications because they're not addressing the core issue, they're only addressing the symptom. The world is on the brink of a fabulous change for the better. And it's cyclic, it does happen over and over. And the history we've been taught that God created Adam 5,000 years ago, that's not accurate at all. There have been countless civilizations that rise up, reach a peak, and then either waves of people ascend or there is a mass destruction because they went in the wrong direction. We are now, this one believes, through direct experience, in a time of very radical change. And that's why I could be retired and float around on my boat and just go to endless coffees and dinners. I give of my time to all manners of ways of serving others to find their truth within. Because that's what's meaningful. At the end of this life, when I willingly and gracefully release the attachment to this body, I know that I will have been of service to others, because that's the most rewarding thing that I know to do. I don't have a string of houses. I don't have a huge stocks portfolio, and I don't miss that. I trust the abundance which is coming to me in other ways, and so I spend my life, my latter years, giving of my divine love capacity that flows through me, not of me.
I wanted to ask a few other questions that popped up
Sure.
while you're talking and what I know of you, and just to share. So, what do you, because you got this strong connection with crystals, and I'm guessing that you might know quite a bit about Atlantis and the power of crystals during Atlantis. So I was interested if
Funny you should ask.
And because, you're talking about civilizations, and I know that was, well, it can be open. I'm open-minded to the idea that was a civilization that was
absolutely
here, and that fell because of this cycle that's occurring now.
Well,
but just interested in maybe what you're aware of, and the crystal wisdom from
crystal
Atlantis.
wisdom, exactly. The essence is that everything is connected, and why crystals are distinct from plastic, a piece of wood, some other man-made thing, is that all the little particles in that crystal follow one particular pattern. That's what defines it as a crystal form. Now, that pattern means that the consciousness inherent in that is very clear and pure. So a piece of plastic is made of all sorts of things, and through heat and pressure and chemical bonding, it glues together. Most of it made from oil. Its consciousness is pretty vaporous and non-specific. A crystal, all the different crystals, each one basically gives out a particular frequency of higher light, beyond the human eye's capacity to see. The band of light that a human can see is about the width of a match head. The true band of light is both arms outstretched. So crystals relate to life through frequency, and certain crystals, particularly quartz, can actually be programmed. Just using clear, coherent thought, you can put a program into that quartz so that it radiates or stores that which you want it to do. So I have two beautiful quartz wands, which I programmed so that the light that comes out of these hands goes through them and gets magnified. So when I spin them in a certain way over the top of the crystals on somebody's body, it makes the crystals on their body vibrate very high and clearly, and then invites the etheric body, the blueprint of the person, to come up into coherence with the crystals. So it can heal physical ailments in various parts of the body. It can heal emotional distortions because of that. So bringing that basic understanding back to the times of Atlantis, which, funnily enough, through meditative practice, I have had visions of a lifetime, 2 different lifetimes when I was in Atlantis. And one of them was working with a giant emerald crystal. In the capital city of Atlantis, we knew and understood about crystal energy. And so there was this really tall, beautiful emerald crystal that those of us who were the temple keepers would spend our time putting our divine connections through our heart in a very special meditation way into that emerald to make it vibrate such that it radiated a loving consciousness into the field around the entire city. So everybody is literally living inside a field of divine conscious love. Now, the true story of Atlantis is that there was a group of beings who came from elsewhere, who came pretending to be happy with and part of us and what we were doing, and infiltrated the power structure with much more sinister intentions. You've probably seen images of miniatures, a human upper torso on the body of a horse. That form of genetic splicing was what these particular beings started doing. They said for experimental, to create something better. Well, it's a pretty weird idea, having something which is half human and half an animal form. That form of things they did and other very weird malfeasances actually caused over time the collective consciousness to be so distorted that a great fracture appeared in that emerald. And those of us in the temple were so alarmed and distraught by this that we went into a very, very strong intentional practice to attempt to heal that fracture. But by then, the, shall we call it, evil, dark, distorted energies that these other ones had brought in, having created all these malfeasances, was so distorted that there were a range of beings holding the sacred knowledge that left Atlantis knowing full well that the only way to truly heal that was to wash it away. And so were those that went to Hawaii, those that went to Peru, those who went to Egypt and up into the Himalayas, knowing full well the time of the great destruction would occur. And it did, because that epoch went as high as it could, but in effect, the ego, that sense of I can create something because I want to have the power and the lust and all the rest that goes with it, that their creations went so far away from what the divine intended that that was scrubbed to start again. This is the end of another cycle. That was 12,970 years ago. Here we are now at the end of this cycle, when those same beings who created all of that stuff are the ones who are running the banks, the ones who are running all these chemical companies. We can grow better food with genetic engineering. Same ethos. They can splice various things because that will make it that they can cover it in toxic substances and it will still produce something that looks like food. But it's not proper food. It doesn't feed the essence of the body. It creates apparent carbohydrates and proteins that feeds the basic nutrients, but not the whole nutrition, which in turn creates the sickness industry to make far more profit. Because anybody who's eating stuff covered in Roundup, glyphosate, all the others, A, they're phytoestrogens. It takes away the male testosterone essence. and it causes damage to the organs, so then people end up in hospital, end up taking all kinds of medications to cope with surviving while still eating toxic food. This is the end of another epoch. This power over by the few, with actually distinctly evil intentions, is now being revealed and being consciously removed from those places of power. You'll own nothing and be happy. All of that mob, they're the ones who don't have the heart at the centre of their intentions. So in effect, it's a repeat of what happened at Atlantis without some of the really fancy things that Atlantean technology was able to achieve. I've spent time in Peru. I've stood in front of structures made of stone that nobody in the Western world can explain how it was done. Huge stones lifted into place with Peruvians who only knew how to make tools out of copper. Copper can't possibly change the shape of this stone. It's harder than quartz. And yet they're exquisitely shaped so they interlock together, and they weigh 50 tons. There's one that's just 200 tons, 8 meters high, standing on other stones, all locked into place in land which often gets earthquakes. But I spent time with Inca wisdom keepers. We did ceremony together. And they explained those stones were shaped by a group of 12, complete focus and toning would make that stone soft and flexible. Through intention, it was shaped exactly to be the right shape and lifted into place. No hydraulic cranes, no chisels, no laser beams. That was the knowledge that they brought from Atlantis and have kept all the way through. So the crystals are power tools. The crystals can also hold, if you like, human form of consciousness. One of the meditations I teach was given to me by a being who lives inside a giant quartz crystals in Sedona in southern Western America. And very clearly, she was speaking to me telepathically, giving me answers for clients of mine at the time. Then on the last day there, she gave me this elegantly simple but profoundly powerful meditation to bring us into heart coherence and magnify our magnetic field that we all have in our hearts, but to intentionally inflame it so that you can soften people's fear, master's anger, simply by sitting next to them when they're in their anger while you're just consciously generating that field. This is consciousness that lives inside a crystal. I've been in ceremony with 2 of the ancient crystal skulls, pure clear quartz, shaped to look just like the anatomy of a human skull, and all 13 of them hold consciousness. Crystals interface. A quartz crystal has a magnetic field, a positive end and a negative end. What makes a lighter create a spark is simply putting vibration into a little piece of quartz, and it gives off a spark of electricity, which will ignite the gas inside the chamber, and whoosh, there you go. You've got your flame.
And they use it in watches.
And in watches
and in TV.
And in computers. We are holding all of our knowledge. The device recording right now is using quartz crystal chips inside the integrated circuits. Our lives are heavily dependent on crystal technology.
Yeah. And I love the story that you give about Adelaide or South Australia, about if you want to explain that.
Sure. There are 3 places on this planet that naturally have in the ground underneath huge beds of quartz. I mean, every beach on the world is covered in white sand, which is just little micro bits of quartz. So why walking barefoot on a beach is really good for you. But Adelaide, Arkansas in America, and Minas Gerais in South America are the three most powerful places for highly intensive quantities of quartz. So Adelaide was built by Colonel Light, who just spent 12 years in Egypt. And so the city itself is built as a square on the north, south, east, west coordinates, so that it is a city of light. It's a city where it was called the City of Churches, because there were so many people in the early days who came here as devout Christians in their particular denominations. When Andy Thomas, the only Australian astronaut to go cruising around the world in the space shuttle, looked down from up there in the satellite, 2,000 miles high, the roads of Adelaide shone bright from space because they're all paved with quartz. So it actually means that the energies here in this particular city, this smaller, unassuming place that all the egoists up the East Coast go, oh, Adelaide, who cares? Never been there. They don't know the fact that there is a profound vibration here, which is supportive of spiritual awakening, which is healing of traumas from places built on very different energies. It's why Byron Bay and that whole caldera is a place of energy, because it's actually, the caldera is the rim of a giant volcano. And the knob, the headland, the most easterly point in Australia, has underneath it a huge bed of obsidian. It's where the indigenous folk went to do ceremony, to have meetings, but they wouldn't live there. That's where the Whiteys have missed the point. The places of intense energy are wondrous places to visit, to purify, to do ceremony, to have learnings and visions, and then to move off and live in a quieter place. So yeah, Adelaide's a very special place. There's great potential here to take this kind of wisdom, to inflame it to the point where thousands of people gather, not to watch somebody kicking a bag of air around. I mean, who really cares? Sport is only an imitation of war. But doing conscious ceremony together is a very, very different thing.
And I know you've been on it, like you were saying, how on certain numbers, significant dates,
Yeah.
You would go to sacred sites that were holding crystal power. Like, so you've been to Mount Chester, and you were just saying then about Sedona. I love these stories, and wondering if you could share a little bit about those adventures.
This is the thing about remembering about Atlantis. That very same giant emerald, when we could see that the bad guys were going to take over Atlantis, we didn't want them to have those giant crystals for them to use for the wrong purpose. So what we did before we left was to put them into an etheric zone, not a physical zone anymore, and put them under an etheric lock. So on the 7th of the 7th, 2007, we reawakened the giant crystal of knowledge, which was a, 18 metre tall, beautiful quartz point, which had actually been heated up to 800 degrees centigrade and then infused with gold, what's commonly called an aqua aura now. And that was put away in an etheric lock. And so on the 777, those of us who were there to put it in that lock were given by spirit guidance the invitation to go into a special meditation to reawaken that. And then on the 999, we did a ceremony to reawaken that very same emerald, which was hidden away in etheric rock in Arkansas in America. So the guy said, you have to go to Sedona, you have to do a ceremony on Bell Rock. I'd never heard of Bell Rock. I'd heard of Sedona, but the notion of me going there became a spirit compulsion to do so. So I turn up in Sedona, and that Children of the Sun group I mentioned, they had a kind of a share house in Sedona at the time. I went and stayed with them. And I was only there for 3 days before the 999 date. And then somebody said, oh, look, the Inca family, those same knowledge keepers, have been up here for a special ceremony. They're still living with a friend of mine. So I go to visit this friend and meet the Incas. And I was carrying with me an emerald ring, a large ceremonial emerald ring, which is part of my collection. So I got to meet the Inca family, and through 2 lots of translation in language, I got them to want to come along and be part of the ceremony. And then their hostess said, oh, 4 months ago I was at some place and this man walked up to me and said, here, you will need this. And he gave me an emerald bracelet. So she said, maybe you need to use this for your ceremony. I still didn't really know what the ceremony was, but I was just going in trust. So, okay, thank you very much. I had the bracelet, I had the ring. So on the appointed moment, sure enough, there is a place called Bell Rock, and it's a vortex energy place. So I'd been there the day before and worked out which was the best circular piece of rock high up the mountain to go and do the ceremony on. And I didn't make any big hullabaloo, but the word had got around. So we climbed up the rock, we started to get set up to do the ceremony, and there were 32 people there. And then the 33rd person turned up, a young woman who comes from Arkansas. And he said, I got this guidance, I had to come to Sedona to do something. I don't know what, but I just jumped on a plane and flew here. And then somebody said, oh, there's an Aussie guy doing something up there on Bell Rock. And she produces a kunzite wand. Now, kunzite is a striated, clear, faintly pink crystal of great peace. And this was a wand that was kind of slightly twisted and about yay long, that fitted perfectly through the emerald ring. So at the last moment, there was the ceremony. Because we started all this at 8 minutes past 8 to complete it at 9 minutes past 9 on the 9th day of the 9th year of the 2000s. So the ceremony became, we passed the ring around in the clockwise male direction, the bracelet around in the anti-clockwise female direction, so that all 33 people could impart their intention into both of these crystals to reawaken their sister giant crystal. And at the last moment, we placed the ring inside the emerald bracelet and placed the kunzite rod through it, pointing from where we were directly to Arkansas, and we all saw this crystal reawaken. Now, it didn't mean it suddenly appeared coming out of the ground, because it's still in the etheric realm, because the bad guys are still here. They haven't been invited to leave fully yet. But it became activated on that day. So that energy of love is going back out into the field of human consciousness. So it all happened, it was all wonderful. Then I met Leilani, then I had that meditation given to me, all of the other things that happened while I was in Sedona for 1 month. Then I came back home, and in meditation, in my healing room, not so long later, hey, here's this vision of a most unusual amethyst. It has 7 points to it. 5 are long and columnar, and then 2 are shorter, so it makes kind of a fan. And that was the ancient crystal of spiritual awareness, also from Atlantis. And that was put in an etheric lock inside Lake Titicaca, the highest elevation lake on the planet. This massive expanse of beautiful waters up in the highlands of Peru. So lo and behold, the 10-10-10 was when we had to activate that. So I did a journey around other highly intensive, beautiful, high energy places to arrive in Peru to be on this little island that takes 9 hours by boat to get to from the mainland. Very remote little place. And there's no power, there's no roads, there's no cars. Everybody lives walking and by hand or do things. Anyway, on that morning, I went this long walk down the island, it's only 4 kilometres long, to the one beach. And when I got to the beach, there were 6 people waiting for me. Come, come, let us begin the ceremony. I didn't know any of these people, but they'd all been guided from where they lived in the world. One from the island, one from Venezuela, some from America, some from Scandinavia. So the 7 of us met to do a ceremony for the 7-pointed amethyst. I go back home. My partner at the time, a month or so later, says, hey, look at this. And another guy who does energetic ceremony work, he went to Sedona from where he lives to do a big ceremony to reawaken, and he had an image exactly the same as the image I had drawn of the 7-pointed amethyst. It's physical proof of the interconnectedness of consciousness and the appropriateness of right now that these crystals are being reawakened. Because it's time for humanity to reawaken to who we truly are.
Beautiful. They're incredible stories.
Yeah.
Great adventures to reflect on.
Well, when I share them with folks, and of course I don't share them with everybody, I share them to give other people that trust. That if somebody walking around who's not on drugs or psychotropic or whatever is telling this stuff, and that there are other people that were part of that journey, then maybe it actually is real. That we are connected in that way.
Yeah.
How does a girl living, 6 hours away by plane, I've got to go to Sedona, don't know why. I've got to take this wand, don't know why. Why does a woman get given this bracelet by a guy who just walked past and said, here, you'll need this?
Yeah.
Consciousness works outside of the boundaries of linear time. Linear time is part of how this game was set up, because eternity is a very long time unless you move outside of the fabric of time to realize that consciousness is absolutely timeless. And what consciousness has manifested into form comes out, has its period, and goes back in again. Why is there a black hole at the center of every galaxy? Because it's a toroidal field of energy, the same as the toroidal field around our hearts, the same as the toroidal field around a quartz crystal. I mean, the goddess was kind of intelligent, of course, but to create one basic format which then manifests as everything. The structure of an atom is the same as the structure of a galaxy. When we understand, when we allow ourselves to go beyond the fear-based limitations of, we'll never get across to the next sun, let alone get across the galaxy, that's thinking linear way. And it's thinking from a science based on the basic premise that stuff existed, somehow the Big Bang occurred, and there's all this stuff. And then from that, at some random moment, a bolt of lightning got a few little molecules out of some bit of mud to start creating life. Completely back to front. Why do space beings come here in technology which is so far above what humans have created so far? Because other beings and other planets, other realms, understand that from consciousness all form is created. So when you think from that, when you heart know from that, in the concept of creating a physical form which is not bound by gravity, does not have to be pushed by burning hydrocarbons on the earth or the illusion of electric cars, which require batteries and requires so much energy from burning fossil fuels to make them that they're therefore better for the environment. It's not true. The real truth is that the energy is here. When you know how to access that and concentrate it, then you can make vehicles move. And this one's been blessed to witness 11 times. Vehicles flying through the sky, hovering motionless, from small to absolutely vast, which don't require rockets or petrol engines or even a Tesla electric motor. Consciousness created form. When we as a collective are allowed to understand that that's the truth, and it's happened this very year. There's a young man in Africa who is now producing cars that come out of China, which have a little box which accumulate etheric energy, and the car can travel at, I think they had it up to 180 k's an hour, and there's no battery. And they've tried to kill him several times, but he's been blessed enough to still be here. So it's here now. You can look it up on the internet. Maxwell, pretty funky name, Chitantambo, I think. Anyway, look up batteryless car coming out of Zimbabwe, and
sounds fascinating.
Yeah, really cool. So
yeah, I on my own spiritual journey, when I went on this retreat. It was my first retreat. I've always been spiritual as such, and have done yoga since I was 19 or earlier, and committed to that because it gave me deep peace for my nervous system and
sure,
maintenance of my body and all the rest, all the other benefits. And I'd done some meditation, but my first retreat I was going on like, who am I? A deep question of who am I? And man, did I get some answers. And that's when I had a deep recognition that we are more than this body.
Fabulous.
And that universal connection, whatever question I had on the ESP level, it came back to me. So it was like I was tapping into the divine, and all this wisdom was coming through. But also it said, Jen, you're here to help, but you've been distracted.
Yeah.
Which life is very distracting, and I was distracted with a bit of partying and travelling and rock climbing and surfing and adventures and all of that. But from when I was 5, I knew I wanted to be a nurse to help. I ran away from home when I was about 5, which I only made it a few hundred metres down the road. But in that moment, I had this deep knowing that I was a nurse in a past life during war. And so I had this weird feeling that I always wanted to work in war-torn situations as a nurse, or in areas of more need than our own society. So, but I sort of, I did emergency nursing, and then I did my postgraduate in emergency. Then after that experience, it was like I was all of a sudden a lot less distracted. And I did study tropical diseases because I wanted to work for Doctors Without Borders. That was always my goal, but it was more like I was getting pulled with distractions. But at the same time, I was making little progresses. Like I worked in a remote Aboriginal community, and because these are all the things that you need to work for Doctors Without Borders.
Yep.
But yeah, after that experience where it was like I had a lot clearer vision and it was more from the heart. So I just wanted to say that, like when you follow your heart, it's like the universe will open the doorways, and it's just like a deep trust. So since that experience, it's like I just have this deep trust and things just work out. So I wanted to do this tropical disease course, and then I was sitting in the tea room, and there was a flyer for scholarships for nurses wanting to do ongoing studies. So I ended up getting a scholarship to do the tropical disease course. I got $15,000 to do it. I was already enrolled, committed, but I didn't really know how I was going to fund it.
Yeah, sure.
And so it paid for flying up to Townsville a few times. I went to Bangladesh with the university. So it paid for that, paid for a new laptop and that you need, to study.
Yeah.
And then since then it's just like, follow my heart and the universe helps, just this deep trust. Yeah.
Isn't that so reassuring when you actually get your own physical experience? That when you have that trust, everything reshapes to support you.
Yeah.
When you're in service.
Yeah.
If you're here just to make money or something for yourself, then you're always fighting to get it. Or you're somehow abusing others for your profit. And being an organic market gardener is not a way to make a lot of money. But it brings such heart joy when you get a phone call from somebody in Darwin saying that, look, I can't eat chemical food because of my sensitivity, but when I got your strawberries sent out, they're the most beautiful strawberries I've ever tasted. And my body doesn't react to the chemicals on them or in them.
Yeah.
So I fully understand that's such a wonderful thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so I feel like when you got a deep connection, what Joe Dispenza says, it's the heart-mind connection that occurs in those experiences. And like you said before, once you have an understanding, because some people will think we're nuts by saying we are more than this body, but once you know, you can't unknow.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'll never look back. And it's like I just have a very strong guidance and the spirituality flows into every aspect of your life, from what you eat to how you raise your children, to how it supports your relationship, and how you live your life. So it's an incredible journey. It's not easy sometimes, and it can be a little bit confronting and painful because you're facing your own wounds, because you're like, well, I've got all this anger coming up, but why? Where does this anger come from? And it's a lot of self-examination, and parenting can trigger that, and relationships can trigger it, but it's a beautiful journey of self-discovery and how to always just come back to peace in your heart. How can I come back to peace? And a lot of that is having to forgive, self-examine where these emotions have stemmed from, recognising that the other person's also in ignorance like yourself sometimes of your own behaviour. You've got those shadows that you haven't shone light on yet, that you're unaware of. Yep. And the other is in ignorance of their behaviour sometimes. So it's like a deep forgiveness and a compassion to recognise that they're also ignorant, and we're just living this life, growing together.
This is the great beauty and joy of being able to impart the guidance that comes from Mother Mary. because one of her favourite sayings, and it's so simple but so elegant, the heart knows, the head only thinks it knows. And so often when you do cultivate the witness, one of her most beautiful meditative practices, you have that capacity then to witness yourself, and then you use the 6 heart virtues of humility first. I don't really know, but I'm having a go. And from that place of humility rather than arrogance, I always know the best, rather than that. It's kind of an irony. A man I know who used to say, oh, I'm never wrong. You know. And now dementia has taken away his knowing of anything right. What we lead to in our experience. Anyway, the thing about the witness is that there's a particular meditative practice she teaches where we cultivate being able to place part of our awareness in one of the chakras higher above our head, called the soul star. It's just above where your hand can reach to. And through this practice, you can place your intention there to observe what down there, the puppet on the strings, is up to. And that, from my own experience, I'm about to go and do something or say something which is not really for the highest good of all. And just before I go, there's a little tap on the shoulder, and the consciousness from up there says, well, come on, you know, if you go over there or you make that statement, what's it really going to do? Is it going to be useful for anybody? I mean, it comes back to that very basic premise. Before you utter anything, is it true? Is it useful? Is it kind? And an awful lot of politicians would never be able to say anything.
What a journey you've taken us on. Wow, I loved hearing your stories and your wisdom and the adventures that your life has taken you on. Sounds like you had a really amazing foundation for who you are today, and it just goes to show with how important that foundation is in childhood, you know.
Absolutely.
To allow this safe, nurturing, connective childhood to then allow these up and coming children to be of the highest service for humanity.
Yeah.
And to be vessels of love, and you're an example of that. So blessed to know you, so grateful for all you've shared today and since knowing you. Yeah, and our community is very grateful as well. And explain
Sure.
where we can find you and what different things are on offer in the future. And if you have offerings up north as well, because
Sure.
Mello is a frequent visitor of Adelaide, but he hasn't. He's not residing here at the moment.
I live on a property up in the hills with these ancient tall trees on the coastal side outside of Lismore in the northern New South Wales. And we have a self-sustainable property there where we have a temple space. And so we're now offering meditation circles and intimate retreats, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, where I am blessed to be able to conduit wisdoms from Mother Mary and a host of other aspects of training on how to live a more conscious, Christed life. So I teach that up there. I also do one-on-one sessions using crystals and the capacity to connect to the higher self of the person who is having the experience. So they receive not only an energetic upliftment, if you will, through the crystal energy, but they also receive a recorded channeling from their own higher self. about what's happening in their lives now, what aspects are holding them back, what avenues of expression would be best to explore and open to. So it's a very uplifting, profound guidance that when people listen back to it all, it's like a meditative journey. They go on a guided visualization to come to meet with their higher self, and then that information is the end of it, which can be for 15, 20 minutes or more. So it's a complete meditative instructional journey that they get to take home and revisit whenever they feel so inclined. So I run retreats up there, and also I come to Adelaide often for equinox, solstice, and those sort of times where it's a high energy thing. So we run events, and also we do the retreats as well. So you can find me on Ascension Pathways on YouTube or in Facebook, or Mello Edwards, and mello60@gmail.com. That is with a small m and a w, mellow60@gmail.com, to find out when the next events are being held or the details about how to be involved. Everybody is welcome to experience more of who they truly are. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing and for your generous offerings. And I'll put them all in the link of these videos. I'm really excited to get it all together and to get it out into the world, so it it can be a ongoing blessing and an ongoing offering of your services, because they're very profound, and it's time to help raise the frequency of humanity, and there's so many gold opportunities here and resources.
Thank you, Jen. It's been my great joy to share this story with you, and your generosity to help get this into a package where others get to see it.
Yeah, thank you very much.